Pope John Paul II. That's what we're talking about now. This morning, millions of Catholics have watched on television and in cinemas around the world as Pope Francis canonised two of his predecessors, the liberal Pope John the 23rd and the more conservative Pope John Paul the 22nd. According to protocol, the usually lengthy process of beatification and canonisation shouldn't start until 5 years after a candidate for sainthood's death. But in John Paul's case, his great friend and successor, Pope Benedict, set the ball rolling within a month. Now, this haste, together with the huge concern there's been across the world over the Church's handling of the child abuse scandal during John Paul II's papacy, have led many prominent and devout Catholics to question its wisdom. Does Pope John Paul II deserve sainthood? Sarah, I think you are going to say yes. He does. What does it mean, becoming a saint? Is it kind of executive club card? What is it? I mean, what's
what it is? You can't make a saint, but you can declare.
So
that
he's already a
saint.
God has recognised him as a saint.
So what the Church does is it recognises that someone's a saint, and the people of God are part of that too. So, for instance, St Anthony of Padua, he was made a saint in a year because it was so evident to the people of God that this was a person who was extremely holy and a fantastic person.
You need miracles.
And could bring about miracles through intercession.
Right,
yes.
okay.
But, and you're right that Pope Benedict did waive the 5-year thing because he heard.
And he waived
so
the miracle
many
rule as well, because John the 23rd only performed or only through intercession was able to effect one miracle. That's when somebody put a picture of him on her stomach and was cured of some such thing. So. But well, two miracles for John Paul II.
Yes, two miracles for John Paul II, but these processes are not the vital thing. Processes, I mean, before the 13th century, people were just declared saints straight away. I think the most important thing...
So it's more rigorous now?
Well, they put processes in place, and, that's great, and that's useful. But I think the important thing to ask, what is a saint, is somebody who is a great antidote to what's going on in the era.
Yes.
And so, for instance, listening to this fascinating discussion about Islam, what did John Paul II do about this great issue of the tensions between religions? And now we know that he called together in Assisi, after St Francis of Assisi...
Can I just... I know, sorry, to give somebody sainthood when they say things that are contradictory, that stuff that is going on in the current era, that qualifies Russell Brand, you know.
One of the things you have to be a saint, Nicky.
He's a great thing, but he ain't no saint.
Well, one of the things you have to be a saint, Nicky, is you have to be dead.
You have to be a Catholic.
So,
you have to be a Catholic as well.
And God bless Russell Brand. He's still
I'm looking ahead. And you have to be a Catholic. In a minute, Paul.
You have to be a Catholic in full communion with the Church, to have lived a holy and heroic life as recognised by the Church. Because the idea is, you know, there are many, many saints, thousands of saints, and many that we don't declare, because there are loads of people that are in heaven interceding, praying for us, praying with us. But the Church will name a saint because they're saying something important from within the Church that we need to hear. And they are an antidote to the problems that are effective.
Okay.
So we see, for instance, John Paul II calling together people in Assisi of all religions and getting them to pray together. That was historical.
Why?
That was meaningful.
Why?
And people need to be brought into dialogue.
No, wait. We must ask this question, because this kicks off the debate and it's in a lot of people's minds.
Yes.
Why should someone who, in the words of the late Christopher Hitchens, first of all, consigned millions to die needlessly from AIDS, and indeed, in John Paul II's own words, believed that homosexuality was intrinsically disordered and an ideology of evil, why should someone like that deserve sainthood?
Firstly, John Paul II did not consign people to die of AIDS. Even secular observers...
Stop the use of condoms.
...observe that where abstinence is preached, that is where AIDS goes down. Secular observers with excellent statistics observe that it is not condoms that prevent AIDS. That can simply be observed. What John Paul II preached was that people are infinitely loved by God, and therefore each individual person is infinitely valuable. And that idea went across his entire pontificate. He welcomed Christ into economic structures and into every area of life. Why? Because he had to show us in this contemporary era that every single person, whether you completely disagree with them or not, is infinitely loved by God, and that is radical always.
Not intrinsically disordered. Anya?
So it's objectively disordered.
Sorry, objectively disordered.
But homosexuality was seen as leading to an intrinsically moral evil, in other words.
Okay, yeah.
And really it's, and as you say then later in 2005, so throughout his papacy, I think created this very harsh tone, which got even worse in 2005 when this ideology of evil idea came out. And I think actually it really set back progress that had been made before Pope John Paul II. And I mean, the truth is that the very harsh tone, it has made a real negative impact on many Catholics, gay Catholics, their friends, their family, and actually, if you look at questionnaires from the Synod of Bishops, most Catholics, certainly in Europe, all deplore that sort of language and the message that sends out. For me as a Catholic that happens to be gay, that detracts from the Christian message of love and compassion.
John Paul II reflected infinite tenderness in all the words and speeches that he gave, and he teaches 2,000 years of Christian teaching. I don't think sexual ethics can be laid at the door of John Paul II.
Hugh.
Well,
Yes,
but I do have to say something really keen.
Well, you've got plenty of time to do so,
Okay.
and you've had quite a lot of time already, Sarah, and it's always a great delight having you on the programme, but there are other people I want to bring in as well, and I will come back to you. Anya, you wanted to respond, then I want to bring in Hugh.
Well, you know, the issue of sexual ethics, the fact is that many gay people felt they were being singled out. So no one will tell, you know, a married Catholic who's using contraception, you'll go to hell. But I've had people say that to me, you know, and that all comes under the this same order of teaching. And the tone that Pope John Paul II used, I think, gave people a lot of grounds for discrimination. Yes, the Catholic Church doesn't promote that, of course not. But the fact is some people interpreted it in that way, and that comes from the top and from the Pope, and we want to see him leading by example.
Hugh Costello, you wrote the book on John Paul, and of course there's the whole issue of the children who were raped and tortured as well. Is there a stain on his reputation?
Oh, there certainly is. I mean, it's all very well to talk about St. Anthony of Padua being acclaimed a saint within a year, but to acclaim John Paul as saint less than 10 years after he died is scandalous, really, given the child abuse scandals that rocked the church. I mean, he was in charge. He was in charge of an institution that covered it up, that failed to confront it, and is still doing so. It still has to be dragged out of them, really, to admit culpability for this. So, you know, he was a great pope in many ways. Out in the world, he was an extraordinary man, great evangelist. He revolutionized the office of pope. I mean, I wrote a book about him because he's an interesting man. I'm not fundamentally against him. But in terms of his management of the Vatican, and particularly of the child abuse scandal, I think it's unseemly, to put it mildly, that he's being made a saint so quickly.
Father?
I think the first and last words out of any Catholic priest's mouth about the child abuse scandal is, "I'm sorry and I'm ashamed." And I don't mean to be pithy, but pretty much that's all I can say, apart from, I'm not like that.
Did John Paul II do enough?
I don't think we will ever, however fast we, the hierarchical institutional church, acts, and no matter how much it does, it will ever be enough, even if only one child had ever been.
So is it a slur on his record?
It certainly is. And
on John Paul II's record?
I think so, yeah.
So why is he a saint?
Well, I would hope that he's been made a saint today because of the man and not because of the office. I hope I don't create a false distinction when we're talking about something that's really, really important. But the key thing that, apart from having to be dead to be a saint, the key thing that most saints are is really flawed characters. It's right from St. Peter. I don't think there's a single saint who wasn't a flawed character.
We're all flawed characters,
exactly,
aren't we?
And
you said earlier on to me that you think your granny is a saint.
I'm sure she is, yeah, because when I went to school I learned that a saint was an ordinary person who did ordinary things extraordinarily well. My gran certainly did that. She'll never be acclaimed by the church as a saint.
You think she's a saint?
But she's a saint for me. And one of the reasons she's a saint for me is, as flawed as she was, she points me in the right direction. And I'd like to think that now that she's dead and in heaven, I've got an intercessor and a friend there. And I think that's what we get from all of the saints.
Hugh?
Well, it's certainly true that all saints are flawed, but I think most of them probably had humility in common as a virtue. The problem that John Paul had was that when he felt strongly about something, which was most of the time, he was very uninterested in the views of people who disagreed with him. But he was quite an autocratic pope. So, for instance, with the AIDS and condom issue, particularly in the developing world in the 1980s, you know, he wasn't interested in the opposing arguments. And likewise, when the issue of women priests came up after the Anglican Church voted in favour of that, not only did he disagree with that, but he squashed it, he stamped it out, he threatened many theologians with excommunication. He was autocratic.
It's an interesting, because I've been thinking long and hard about what it means that we concentrate on John Paul II today because we remember him. He's in living memory.
But the Iron Curtain coming down.
When he went to Poland, that was
wasn't
he? Absolutely.
Now, here's the thing. I've been trying to work out what it means that John the 23rd and John Paul II have been together, because they were both very different characters.
It's like a political ticket.
But one of the things they did in the church is...
One liberal, one conservative.
Well, yes, but at the same time, both people that moved the church into a position where it engaged with the world at large rather than stood against it. So John the 23rd started the Second Vatican Council, and very famously, when the Roman Curia, who were against it, they didn't want it because they thought it would dilute the power that Rome had. When one of his Curia staff asked him what he hoped to achieve, he famously went over, opened a window and said, maybe we'll let a little fresh air in. And I do believe that's what happened with the Second Vatican Council. Similarly, but in a different way, with John Paul II, he made the worldwide church a small place he went all over the place. But I do think that means, and this isn't to exonerate him, I think you're correct about the way he ruled, but I do think that means that at the end of his papacy, the Curia certainly ruled the roost.
Okay, in the audience, yeah, there's a gentleman there with the glasses, and make a quick point.
Yeah, the point about being a saint, yes, he's done good, he's done quite a lot of good, but he's also done things that he should have, he's also not done things that he should have done. Child abuse is certainly one thing. He won't be able to get rid of child abuse because you can never get rid of child abuse. But you can investigate it once it comes about.
And gentleman beside
the other point is that, to me, the person who I feel should be a saint and can do a miracle is to create lasting peace in the world.
Who's that going to be? Do you want to say something? Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the fact that he's being made a saint is quite, in many ways, a disgrace. I mean...
Disgrace?
Yeah. I mean, the sexual abuse scandal, I think he was in the Pope for, 27 years, something like that, and the evidence would mount up continually over the years, and he willfully ignored such evidence, as well as the lack of contraception in Africa.
Do you think people died as a result of this papacy?
Definitely as a result of his policy in Africa, yes. A lot of people's lives were ruined as a result of the sexual abuse.
1.72 billion people have died of abortion. Now, one of the things that John Paul II was very keen on was that every single person was important, and that we can't use people for economic reasons, we can't use people for sexual reasons, and we have to appreciate that every single person is important. His catechesis on sexuality was about respecting
I think we need a response
people.
to that figure about people who've died from abortion. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, I don't know the figures on abortion.
This concept of dying from abortion, I thought you might want to
well,
respond to that for the sake of balance.
Not,
who would like to respond to that? Ajmal.
Not on abortion, but generally about the sainthood. It's quite alien for Muslims, so I'm very curious.
Do you respect John Paul II as a great religious figure?
For what he's done and what he hasn't done, I have to be objective. And objectivity says to me that if there are problems with what he has done, then he needs to be put to account. But I have a problem with the concept of sainthood as a concept, as a whole, because as a human being, we're all the same, flat, one level, no hierarchy. The moment you create somebody as a saint, you create hierarchy. Is there a need for hierarchy? And the second question I have is, to find God, do you need to have different tiers within our lifestyle?
No,
should we not all have one access and direct access to God? So I'm sitting here thinking, it doesn't sit very well with me, giving one human being that same...
Okay, so in heaven, what's the situation? Is he at the top table?
It's definitely not a hierarchy. Definitely not a hierarchy. What we do with the saint is...
backstage pass and all that?
I hope not. I hope not. What we do
for people who don't know, they don't understand.
No, for me...
Communion of the saints.
Yeah, exactly. And my gran's at the Communion of the Saints. It won't do anybody else any good because they didn't know, but I know her. My gran's at the Communion. Now, so what a saint does... It's very simple. Of course, it's a level playing field, but we honour the way that somebody lived their lives. And what we want from all people of faith, ultimately, is that their life somehow points towards God. Not in a perfect way, but just did that that guy or that lady, did they point me towards God in some way? So what we want with the saints is a quick way of understanding it was imagine your favourite film star, and you get invited to a party and you're going to meet them and you're a bit nervous, you know a little bit about them, you've read everything about them, you've been a fan of theirs for ages, but you're actually going to meet them and they're going to be late to the party. In the party, though, are lots of other film stars who you know. You really, really like them, you're quite nervous, but you think, oh, that actor was in that film with them, that actress was... And you pluck up the courage and you go and find out, what were they like when you were in that film?
So it's like the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Tell you, well, no, but the point is they tell you a story, they inform you about their relationship with them.
Are the Muslim
I'm
saints?
sure there are,
Would the
yeah.
Prophet... Would the Prophet Muhammad be made a saint?
In Christian church.
Wait.
You have to be a Catholic.
What I hope...
You have to be a Catholic, says Sarah.
But
you
you
have to
can
be-
be a
you have to
Catholic.
We've
To be
got
a
a
Catholic
schism
saint.
in the Catholic Church over here.
You have to
To
be...
be a Catholic saint.
To be recognized...
Osama Hassan.
This is a really interesting discussion.
It is.
about
Osama Hassan. Be with you in a minute.
religion
With you in a
and
minute. Osama Hassan, as a Muslim theologian, what do you make of this? Sainthood.
It's very interesting. In Islam, in the Quran, there's a word called awliya, which is the friends of God. And they're basically people who do good. And an early theological text by Imam Tahawi says all believers are friends of God. Effectively, all believers are saints. I would actually include that to people of all religions and faith who are good, and also to humanists and others who don't have a formal faith, if you like, but who do good. So, and the idea is actually only God knows in the end who does good. And the second issue about all this is the issue of miracles. I think is very interesting. As a scientist and a religious person, the Catholic Church insists on, is it at least 3 miracles or something?
Well,
and he just begs the question, are miracles within the laws of nature, or do they break the laws of nature? Does God...
Intercession.
Does God break the laws of nature? That's just a very interesting question.
It is an
about the
interesting
relationship between science and theology.
Yeah, it is a very interesting question.
I don't want to be all relativist,
But Sarah, it's only Catholics who can become saints.
That's just within the Catholic Church. Obviously, there are lots of other people in heaven, and we do believe that. The point
Well,
about science and
that's a
faith...
two-tiered heaven, isn't it?
So in the
Within
Jewish
God,
tradition-
within the communion of saints...
Can you become a
that's the
Catholic when you
people-
go to heaven? So,
Nikki, I
One
think...
question at a time, Nikki. Back
Well,
to
it's,
saints and
you know.
miracles.
No, we honour our saints,
Yeah.
and that's part of our tradition, that's part of our faith. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other people there that are all saints. What's really interesting, when when Pope Benedict came in 2010, he spoke to the young people of this country and said, God wants you all to be saints. He said, who are the saints of the 21st century? Hopefully I'm speaking to some of them
to
now.
inspire people.
Yeah.
You've been wanting to come in.
Yes.
You had lots to say in the last
I think
debate.
The missing picture from the legacy of John Paul is the political stance. And that is something that went down very unpopular with people all over the world.
What was
Because
the
he sided with the Reagan administration for a long period, for 8 years. And that reflected in negative politics and policies in Latin America, in the Middle East, etc. So that picture must be mentioned when John
Sarah,
Paul...
you sided with the Reagan administration.
Well, I don't know in detail
It was the time of the
about
Cold War, wasn't it? Yeah.
John Paul II, if you hear his speeches to people of power, if you listen to his speech to the powerful in Latin America, he saw the horrors that were going on there. And when he spoke to them, he shook them up. He said, you, the powerful, you allow these conditions, these wicked conditions, he called them, to carry on. It's not just, it's not human, it's not
But
Christian.
he was no great fan of the liberation theologists. Many
He was
of them
a
were very radical.
He
and
was
they
a
were
great
taking...
fan of those who did not use violence. He empathised with the suffering. That's why he went to 104 countries to be close to the suffering.
Hugh Costello.
He was passionate about being close to the
I
suffering.
would say in his defence that although he sided with the Reagan administration, particularly with the fall of communism, he condemned the First Iraq War and was generally quite anti-war in his stance, anti-capital punishment. So he wasn't really hawkish on the Middle East in the way that you're depicting.
No.
He was in the war against communism,
But
which he helped to.
He did very little.
Well, he did very little,
You know,
but
for the Middle East, for Latin America, he took sides in Nicaragua.
he didn't. He took sides in
against
certain
the
situations.
liberation movement, the centered
I don't think you
Islam.
can pick. I don't think it's really fair to portray him as a Reaganite hawk in all circumstances.
It's not me. It's
Rabbi
not me.
Esther.
It's not my view. It's documented.
All right, Rabbi Esther.
So in the Jewish tradition, we teach that anyone who is a good person, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, can get to heaven, right? And that we are judged by our deeds. And I think the important part of this discussion, I mean, I'm not going to go into the details of, you know, religious policy, that's not part of my faith community, but the important aspect of this discussion is what is the role of religion in a modern world? And we progressive Jews, we read our texts, our biblical texts, in such a way that they should be liberating. And that includes taking a positive stance towards homosexuality. And that includes taking a positive stance towards gender equality. And, you know, the scriptures, the Bible, the Hebrew Bible says very clearly, not by might, not by power, but through my spirit. And that should be the continual civilizing impulse of religion.
OK, and Sarah, I'm going to give you the last word. We've only got a few seconds, maybe about 20 seconds. What would you like to say on this auspicious day? You must be very happy today.
I'm very, very happy, because he was a person that gave us hope, because he said everyone was valuable, and he said women were valuable, and they had a feminine genius, and he said to women, your hour has come, and you're called to humanise the world as women, not by being men, but by being women, because you are absolutely special, more important than priests. Priesthood is spiritual fatherhood, and each of you is a spiritual mother in every way, whether you're single or married. And the most important thing that he said was that God is alive in all of us, and the mystery
God
of man
is alive in all of us. The
by
most important thing he said, she's more important than you. The debates continue online. We'll be back from York next week. Thank you for watching.